Every one of our clients will own at least 5 investment properties.
And it's our mission to show you how. My name's Frank Ambezi.
And I'm Adrian Trimboli, and welcome to the Invest in You podcast.
Ready to rumble?
Let's do it.
Frank, today we are talking about housing in Australia, why it costs so much, and if the trend can continue for the next 10 years. Hello, my friend. Hope you're well.
Welcome.
Welcome. Can you unpack for the viewer how much housing costs? I'm talking like land, construction, government levies and whatnot, how it's changed over time, and I guess your outlook on where it is going.
Yeah, awesome. So, a lot to unpack right there.
There's a few questions.
There is. And so I think we can first kind of start with land value and kind of how things have changed over the coming years. I've got data with me, so I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, and I've sourced the web to get all this information to make sure we can talk about facts.
Thank you.
So when we look at, I guess, land value and square meterage, once again, it's quite hard. We're going off average, and I'm going off just capital cities.
Yep.
Because they got the most transaction, it's the most land mass and transactions in the whole country.
Yep.
Compared to, say, regional towns and things like that. We look at Sydney, and now Sydney's quite broad. So I'm talking here, when I say Melbourne, Sydney, of course, this is an average of the whole city.
Okay.
We do know you go specific LGAs or specific locations, it's going to vary and change and be more expensive or even less than what I'm going to be saying here. So on average, land value in Sydney is $2,466 per square metre. So you can just say $2,500 per a square metre of land.
Love it.
Melbourne, about $1,800. Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide, $1,200.
Cool.
Per square metre.
Yep.
So you look at that, over time that has definitely increased as the years have gone on.
Of course.
No ifs or buts about that. I think where housing has got unaffordable is not because, if you look at land prices have gone up, it's not because of naturally gone up. It's like, why has it gone up? Is it because of the build costs have gone up? Is it because of population increase? Is it because of government policies? And this is where I think, the underlying question lays.
What's your take?
My take is the people that are in power are the ones that cause this issue. Because if you've got government policies and those policies are influencing the property market for maybe because of population, maybe because of job creation, maybe because of a bunch of whole other things, because of certain policies, government policies, incentives and cuts, or maybe increases in taxes, that there is going to affect the property market. Every decision that a politician makes has an effect. The people that are in power, so this is what's crazy. We've got people screaming today, for the last 5 years, we've had one of the biggest booms in the country.
The property prices
have grown. Okay, let's just look at the last 5 years. Perth, 100% nearly of growth. Brisbane, nearly 100% of growth. Adelaide, nearly or over 100% growth. Okay, in the space of 5 years, those three capital cities.
Yep.
When you look at WA as a regional town, South Australia and Queensland as well, there are places that have done more than 100% in 5 years.
Of course, as an average.
Yeah, as an average, which is crazy, okay? That there, if you look at the people that are in power, the federal government, okay, they've had a massive influence because of that.
How so?
So you look at government policies and you look at projects, infrastructure spend, creation of jobs, okay, with that influences property markets. Not just that, when you do that, what happens? People leave other places around the country and will migrate to a new location. That pushes up property prices. Okay, so the bananas that are saying, we're gonna, housing's too expensive, this is our solution, and whatever they're doing at the moment, currently doing, isn't working. But we put them back in power, and they think, what we're gonna do is increase land tax in Victoria. That's gonna fix the solution here and stop investors buying. People that are listening to this, investors make up 30% of the market. Investors make up 30% of the property market. 30% of properties that you see in Australia, 30% of them are owned by investors. The other 70% are just mum and dad, families, that own their property for themselves.
Yep.
So when you have, there's taxes, they're putting higher taxes on land tax. When they're increasing stamp duty, okay, you can do that, insert, and it can have an effect like it has in Victoria. But what it's also done, it's pushed people out and made them go to other new locations. Like I said, Queensland, South Australia, WA. There's a lot of jobs getting created, a lot of internal migration, a lot of people moving and migrating there. That has a flow-on effect and pushes up property prices. So with everything that's going on, okay, affordability was in those areas and now it's pushed up the prices there. And you look at Brisbane, Adelaide, even parts of WA are more expensive than Victoria.
Yep.
Or Melbourne,
Yep.
if you want to. We can touch on Melbourne and even some places in Sydney also.
Which is fine, and that is fine. Obviously, if they're trying to cull the price growth by adding stamp duty concessions, or sorry, not concessions, raising stamp duty, raising land tax, that's fine. Yes, that may have a short-term impact on property prices. However, like we've probably seen in Melbourne or parts of the country, it's not like it just has a great effect on the property prices. It also has an effect on the rental prices. You said here you're moving out of your home right now. This is not connected because we're just about to move out of this podcast room. There was how many people that came through your house?
50 groups.
50 groups that came through your house from a rental perspective. That is a problem because 30% are investors. Now, if investors are moving out of there and they're selling their houses, or they're moving out of Victoria, they're moving out because there's all these legislations around land tax and whatnot, it becomes less investors, means there's less rental properties, meaning the renters of the country, they cop it. Now, if you've got investment properties, tremendous. That means that your property prices, your rental prices are going up and up and up. And also the property prices are also going up like you alluded to. So there's always a negative to a positive. Yes, property prices might not have gone crazy in Melbourne, in let's call it Sydney over the last 5 years, potentially, but rents have gone ballistic, which is also a problem.
And when you've had, you got the government here saying we need more overseas migration. Fantastic, that's awesome. I'm not against that. But when you're bringing in over 500,000 people in 1 year into Australia, and you have a housing shortage, how is that going to help the housing market? Like, where's the logic in these people's minds? The crazy thing is, government comes out, they say we need to build $1.2 million properties in 5 years.
Yep.
Okay, that's nearly, quarter of a million properties a year? They're building 170,000 properties a year, and that's decreasing.
So it's 80,000 less than what they should be should be creating every single year.
And they make up probably 1% of that.
Sorry. Explain that to me if you could.
170,000 properties they're building currently.
When you say they are building, that's private builders.
Private and public sector.
Gotcha.
Of that, 1% or less than 1% is from the public sector that they're building those properties. And they're coming out and they're saying we need to build $1.2 billion, I keep mucking this up, 1.2 million properties in 5 years. But they build 1% of those.
So 17,000 are being built by the public sector. Of those, 170 or whatever the remainder is, the vast majority of that 170% is from the private sector. Private people, just builders.
Developers, mum and dad investors, just the average Joe just doing the development for themselves.
Yep.
That's who it's coming from.
So then what happens, because they need to build 250,000 new dwellings each year over the next 5 years. If they're at 170, that's 80,000 houses. Now, you might hear that and go, oh, that's not too big. That's 80,000 people a year that potentially don't have housing.
Well, this is the thing, Adrian. You can ask me what's going on, but how come we don't point to the premiers and say, hang on a second, what's going on here? How come we're not hitting the targets? If you're not hitting targets, but you're running a country and you're saying, hey, we need to build all these properties because we have a housing shortage and prices are expensive and it's hard for Australians to buy a house, especially the young Australians. Yeah, that's true. What are you doing about it if we're having a shortage of build every single year?
Well, I know that, let's talk about a business. If your part of the business doesn't hit a certain amount of purchases at the end of the month, I come knocking on your door and say, what the fuck has happened? I don't know if that's their same level of accountability, but I mean, we can get and talk about conspiracy theories and whatnot and go down a very dark rabbit hole if we want. I don't think we're going to do that on this podcast. Maybe that's for a Saturday night at 3 a.m. So then what does it actually result in? Where does that mean that we're actually heading? Because rental prices are at a record high. Property prices are at a record high, right? Every year they should be going up. But if this housing shortage continues and continues and continues, like, are we going to get to a point whereby, I don't know, like there's countries around the world where there's now laws where, you know, things can't even happen, and the government's literally needed to step in to say, hey, this needs to be the case. Like, where are we actually heading? What is actually going to happen?
So if you like, there's a lot here, because if this keeps going in the same trend, prices are just going to get more expensive, especially if we increase migration or continues the same trend. There's not enough housing now. Yes, the government is electing people that come from overseas and migrate to Australia to other parts around the country. Not because majority of them actually are coming to Melbourne and Sydney. Majority is actually coming to Melbourne, but they've gone to Sydney as well.
Yep.
So of course, if you look at rental prices are going through the roof in Melbourne at the moment. Sale prices are not really blowing up just yet, but they're starting to turn, and the tide's starting to turn, and it's going to start moving in the right direction of, growing in value. But where this all goes is the government are making it easy for investors, and especially for foreign investors. So foreign investors have dropped off by 50% of developments in Australia. So they've dropped off 50% of the build volume that they were building of the high-rise apartments. So we had a lot of foreign people or foreign investors across the world coming investing in Australia. If that drops by 50%, which it has, that also has an effect, because really we're moving in that way of life where people can't afford a $1 or $2 million home, but they can afford a $500,000 apartment and live in an apartment. And that's not happening at the moment. And they've made it so hard as well for the foreign investors. They've put surplus charges on top of
tariffs,
land tax and stamp duty. Listen how crazy this is.
Here we go.
So if you're buying a property in, say, Sydney, there's an extra 4% surcharge on top of stamp duty. So you'll pay your traditional stamp duty. Let's just use a normal stamp duty of a $1.5 million property. Okay, you'll pay $67,000 in stamp duty. If you're a foreign investor, you're going to pay the $67,000 of stamp duty plus another $60,000 on top of that, which is 4%.
Okay.
Listen how crazy this is. If it was Victoria, you'll pay 8% on top. So instead of paying $60,000, you're going to pay an extra $120,000.
Okay, which is almost a complete deterrent depending on the amount of cash that a foreign investor has. Were you going to keep going with something there? I've got a question to throw at you.
I'm just going to round it off. So you buy a $1.5 million house in New South Wales. You're an Australian citizen, you pay $67,000 in stamp duty. You're a foreign investor, you buy a $1.5 million house. You pay $127,000 in stamp duty.
It's crazy. I understand though I understand that, but again, there's a pro and con with everything, because again, these are humans that, they should be intelligent humans sitting around a table making this decision. The goal of that was to stop the trajectory of prices going ballistic. Is that would you say that would be the reason why they've brought that in?
Well, not really, because if you have more properties coming onto the market, there's more supply, it outstrips your demand, and prices won't shoot up. Okay,
but them, like foreign investors going and buying these assets, it's not, is it developing, you're saying?
There's been a 50% reduction in developing apartments from foreign investors.
So that is the negative effect of this occurring.
Of course. And then of course there's foreign investors buying property and sitting on it and either land banking, or they're either, holding houses, whatever it may be, and just using them as rental properties, which of course doesn't help as well, because we need, we would love to have those houses go to Australian citizens and they can live in, but at the same time, at least they're putting some rental properties on the market as well. So there's good and bad in everything that happens. But if you keep making it difficult for investors in Australia and even foreign investors to get into the market, have more rental properties or develop in the market, how are you going to fix this issue? How are you going to fix an issue if you increase land tax, you keep increasing stamp duty, you keep increasing rates, you keep increasing insurance? Hey, we need to build 250,000 properties. Let's take foreign investors out of it. Australian citizens, it's up to you guys. Because 1% of the builds that happen every single year are from the public sector.
Yep.
But hey, we need you guys to do it, but we're going to tax you more. We're going to penalise you more. How are you going to fix that issue?
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. So what is this, let's say that tomorrow you get called up, you're in the big hot seat, and they say, cool, fix this housing issue. What would you go and do? What are you trying to do?
If I got into power, I'd sack everyone. Honestly, I would sack everyone in that.
Hire me.
I would sack everyone because they don't even know what they're doing. Because if you're so intelligent, and you're running the show, how can you not see this?
So what would you do?
Honestly, I'd sack everyone.
Yeah, pass the sacking. We'll get Amelia into the role, get me into the role. We'll bring Sebastian.
Doge. We'll get Doge in. This is what, look, I don't have the solution. This is my kind of take on it. You got to start reducing development costs. Okay? And give the developers and the builders tax incentives. Okay? Because if you're taxing them at a higher rate or at the same rate, or we have higher land tax thresholds, and we have, especially for trust or company.
You're talking Australia-wide, or you're talking Victoria?
For Australia-wide.
Okay.
Development. So if development costs are expensive as they are at the moment.
Yep.
And if we just quickly touch on that, you've had over 2,000 builders go bust since COVID.
Yep.
So there's less builders in the country.
Yep.
You've had up to 50% increase in materials. Yep. So it's more expensive now to build a property. I haven't even touched on some of these numbers, which I'd love to touch on.
Throw the numbers at me. I want the solutions though, because I'm happy to sack people, but we need to have solutions as well, right?
Or just to build a 250 square meter house these days, which is a decent sized home, you're looking at nearly $600,000 to build that house.
Yeah, because of the materials, because of everything. Because of everything. Yep.
By the time you build that house, $600,000, you still have to buy the land. Average land in Melbourne and Sydney varies. On an average for Melbourne, it's around $450,000. Of course, that's taking in.
That's a very big average.
That's a very big average.
Yeah.
And in Sydney, it's around $680,000. So once again, it can be higher in Sydney and a lot higher in Melbourne in certain parts.
Yep, of course.
So let's just say you use Sydney, for example, you buy a $600,000 piece of land, you got to develop on it, 600 grand, 1.2 million, you've got your loans, you've got your expenses after that, you're probably going to be, in the hole around $120,000 a year in mortgage fees. Yep. So you look at that, it doesn't make sense for some people to do that for themselves as getting into the market, but as well from a development perspective, as well, there's not much margins. Margins have dropped off dramatically. Margins in building were normally 20%, some even up to 30%. They're at 15% or lower. Cool. And the problem is there's too much risk involved because of prices have inflated with not just land prices, but also materials that it's hard to build.
Yep. Okay. So that's the first thing. Incentives to the developers, whether they're private mum and dad developers or whether they're big corporations, you want to give incentives to them. That's the first thing.
Yeah, development incentives to help with that. If it's grants or if as well even lower taxes for builders and developers to build so they actually can make a profit and build more properties and incentivize the builders and developers and mum and dad investors to do this so we can actually increase housing in Australia. Yep.
Okay, so that's the first thing. What else?
Well, reducing income tax, I think, might be another thing that can help. Not just I guess, the developers, but in reducing income tax for everyone in Australia.
Oh, that's a big one.
It's a big one, but I think I look at it as if you reduce the tax, we make more money per year. Our incomes go up. That means we can save more. It means you can borrow more money. When you borrow more money, you can borrow it to, especially if you use it as productive, buying a house, investing in a business, whatever it may be, it will help turn the economy. We've got some of the highest tax rates in the world. There's no incentive for us to actually go out there and start a business or invest in property or buy a home. You're creating a culture now that's actually making it so hard for people that they just give up. In America, you've got things like the 10, I think it's a 1067 rule, or maybe I've forgotten the actual the number. It was like a 1067 rule, or a rule that they have. If you sell a property, you've got 6 months. It's like 3 to 6 months to get into another property and not pay any capital gains tax. So it incentivizes you. Hey, you sell your property, that's fine, but you have to go back into the market and buy another property. Why? Because it actually creates more jobs. You give someone else a home, and they won't charge you land tax.
Cool.
Sorry, not land tax. Capital gains tax.
Yep, which is huge in Australia.
Which is huge. Here in Australia, you pay stamp duty, and in America, they don't have stamp duty as well.
Gotcha.
But you pay stamp duty, you pay your legal fees, you pay all these outgoings, you pay your taxes, you buy a property, you sell it, you got to pay capital gains tax.
Yep.
And I think that, that's one thing I look at is the margins, and the margins is very slim for investors if they want to buy, sell. But I think things like that, with that rule that they've got, the 1036 or 1067 whatever, law, whatever they've got in America, something like that could definitely help. But I think just reducing taxes in general needs to be
Which is going to be difficult. That's probably never ever going to happen. But okay, all right. That's the second thing.
We can't, because if we keep increasing debt, one way to pay back debt is just tax the people more. That's how the governments get their money back. Tax the people more, get the money back like that, and that's how we're going to pay back this debt, which we'll never pay it back, but they just keep increasing the debt and increasing.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm already at the point. You've raised two things right there. The blatantly obvious thing that's coming through my mind is, what is valued more from a government? Make more money or provide people with more housing? I could almost guarantee, and we can go down a deep dark hole, it would be make more money. There ain't a government in this world that's reducing taxes,
no.
And there probably ain't a government in this world that's going to lower stamp duty or give more incentives. Maybe I'm wrong, but what is more important? It's probably not to make less money. It would be or to fix the problem of less housing. But anyway, let's keep it rolling. That's two. So reduce taxes, incentivize builders. I definitely agree with the first one. The second one, up for debate.
Look, I think with the foreign investors that get taxed more from a stamp duty and land tax perspective, there has to be a change to that, because you're not attracting foreign investors, and we do need foreign investors, and every other country has foreign investors. So,
well, the government ain't doing anything. It's 1% that they're building. So to put pen to paper, or to put their money where their mouth is, they would either that, or the builders, they need to incentivize something. If they're not going to do that, they need to go out and start building properties. If they really give a fuck about housing shortages. If they care. If they don't...
If they care.
Yeah, I'm being a bit cheeky there. They clearly don't care. If homelessness went to crazy amounts, or if people couldn't rent properties, they'll pop it on the news, and they'll be really active in making people who are suffering. They'll pop them on Channel 9 News. They'll give them airtime. What are they actually doing? That is a different story. I 100% agree with point one and point three. Excuse me.
And another one that I have is land tax. Land tax and stamp duty. I don't know why you can buy the same property in Queensland at the same value, but you buy it in Melbourne or Victoria and the stamp duty is up, an extra 2-3%. It doesn't make sense. So having stamp duty, I think that's fair, like maybe at a Queensland rate across the country, makes more sense, because you can pay tens of thousands of dollars less in stamp duty by investing in a different state.
Yep.
And I think the land tax as well, if you look over the last 3-4 years, land tax went up in Victoria.
Yep.
What did it do? Made people exit out of Victorian markets that had rental properties. It got out, they went to other states and bought properties there because of land tax threshold differences in land tax thresholds. Like Queensland, you don't pay land tax until the land value exceeds over $600,000. If the property's in your personal name.
Yep. Trust is different, obviously, but yep.
Trust is different. You buy it in Victoria, if the land value hits over $50,000, which straight away it will, you're going to start paying land tax.
Yep.
So I think that has to stop, especially for Victoria and New South Wales has the highest. Concession. Victoria is the highest, but of course New South Wales is up there too.
So just on that, right? Because again, there's a positive and negative with everything that you are saying, right? It's not all positive. Frank should be Prime Minister tomorrow, right? Because it's not that simple. You reduce land tax, you reduce stamp duty, all of a sudden property prices are probably going to go higher, right? There's more money to be put into the property, correct? That is the negative of that. Yes, it might mean more investors, which means more rental properties, mean rental prices aren't as high, but it also is going to cause issues, right? And I just want to highlight that. It's not just make the decision that's done.
Of course, there's going to be a negative to this as well, but there has to be some sort of slow release of change, making some changes to this to help. Would you go in order of how I've gone through it and say, hey, we do this first, we do that second? No, maybe not. But I've just mentioned a few things there that can happen. And I think starting off slow, like foreign investors, maybe, releasing that expense for them to say, hey, instead of charging you 4% or 8% on top of stamp duty, and same goes for land tax, well, let's remove that maybe. Maybe there is a little bit of an extra charge we have to charge, but make it fair and start bringing that in so they can build more properties. Fantastic.
Yep.
Okay, maybe if we start saying, why don't we start reducing taxes for development and giving in grants to developers and builders so we can actually build more properties? Fantastic. They make a better margin.
Yep.
Fantastic. That means we can build more properties. Awesome. That starts to bring more properties onto the market. The more that we can bring properties onto the market that are new properties and new builds, we're going to be able to fix this issue. Okay, so the more we can help with more supply, reduces demand. And it's pretty simple with any investing strategy or any investment in the world.
Yep.
Supply versus demand. That's all it is.
Yep. And the less supply is just going to mean that everything skyrockets, whether it's rental, whether it's housing. Okay.
And I think the people that are listening to this, just look at what's going on now. In 3-4 years, if we have Melbourne boom, which it will, and we have Sydney that probably potentially might boom as well, and it gets even more unaffordable, just question who you're actually voting for. Honestly, look, I've never been a big voter. I never used to vote. I used to actually just throw the thing in and not get the fine and not vote for anyone.
I get the fine.
These days, I look at it as, look, who's good to vote for? I ask questions, who's good to vote for? But the problem is, the people that are in power, it's been a whole schmozzle from day one, and it still is, and I guarantee it will still follow the same trend.
Yeah.
And if we keep putting these people in power and we don't make a change and say, hey, we actually need to make a change and stand up together, then don't keep complaining and saying, hey, I'm voting for anyone, or I keep voting for the same party. And you're complaining about the house price is unaffordable, I can't buy a home, it's too expensive.
Yep.
Do something about it.
Yep, I'm with you. I mean, I think the biggest thing that has come from this is really a question of, yes, government and people in power are saying that these things need to be fixed. The question should really be, do they actually want it to be fixed? And do they want it to be fixed more so than what their hip pocket or what the government needs money in their pocket? Because let's be honest, they could do all of these things, and I'm pretty sure they're all intelligent people. They've sat around and they've said these things, but it has probably come back to, well, hang on, does the state make less money? And if the state makes less money, that means less money we can go down a bit of a rabbit hole here.
We can get the tinfoil out, but I guess the thing is, if you're going to say intelligent people, I'm not sure if they're intelligent, because if you look at over the last 5 years, we've had rental listings drop nearly 50%. I'll say it again, we had rental listings drop by 50%.
Victoria, you're talking?
Nationwide. 50% less rental properties. That's why rents have skyrocketed. That's why my rent here at this house has increased on the market after 1 year, $150. That's not normal. $150 increase on rent 1 year.
It's crazy.
And how's that going to, if that keeps happening in every, place around Australia, maybe not 150, but 50, 60, 70 bucks or more.
Yep.
That's a big increase.
It's massive.
And the way it's going like that, for the people that don't have any assets or don't have a business that can create wealth or other investments, they're the ones that are going to really struggle.
Yep.
For me and you, we know what's going on. We keep up to date with these things.
Yep.
We invest in property, but of course we understand how things work, and we know how to get it ahead of the curve. A lot of people don't, and I think it's a good message here to start realizing, okay, if you're not there, you got to start making a change.
Yep.
Which is probably another podcast about that too. So,
being left behind and being stuck in the rat race until you actually die.
That's still recording or not?
Which one? Yeah, I'll get it to start recording.
Ready to rumble?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool, Frank. So we've ran through quite a few things. I mean, I think the biggest one is if you're in power, what you would do. And I think it's a good exercise, right? I think there's a lot of things that are going wrong, but the blatantly obvious thing is that it looks like everything is going towards the one direction. House prices will continue to go up because they're not fixing the supply issue anytime soon. Rental prices are going to continue to go up. As you just mentioned, there's been a 50% reduction in the last 5 years. And most importantly, every single year that goes by, their 1.2 million house build in the next 5 years, which is 250,000 a year. I mean, they're already behind the 8 ball. They're missing out on 80,000 every single year. So unless they incentivize builders, unless they incentivize foreign investors, unless they do something to re-kick the amount of buildings that are going on and the amount of people that are actually staying in certain cities, certain regions and not pushing them out, we are going to have a continued problem with this. And house prices are going to continue to go up. Rental prices are going to continue to go up. The separation between, dare I say, rich and poor, the low income earners versus the high income earners, it's just going to continue to expand. I'd like it if you could just leave a few last notes or a few last pieces of your thoughts. Nothing around politics or nothing around voting you in a couple of years' time when you go run for Prime Minister. But any last thoughts before we finish up?
Look, I think we can sit there and blame the government for what's going on and say, look, it's their fault. This is why prices are expensive.
Yep.
And they are part of the issue.
Yep.
But I think as well, you got yourself to blame if you don't do something about it and take action.
Cool.
So for the people that are listening or watching, stop. We can sit there and today we had a discussion about what's going on. Partially it's the government's fault of what's going on and how prices have influenced and increased. But also we've both taken action and still invested in property.
Yep.
We've still built our business. We're still moving forward. A lot of people that are sitting there complaining and saying, hey, it's unfair. I can't get ahead. I can't save. You definitely can. You just may have to make some changes to your lifestyle to get ahead.
Yep.
And it might not have to be forever. But for the people that are listening, you're going to have to do something. Otherwise, you are going to get left behind. So I think I'll leave people with that saying, hey, it's good to point the finger at someone and say, hey, it's their fault, like the government, which they're probably, they should take responsibility and be accountable.
That's
but
not going to happen.
Also, you've got to be accountable for your own actions and your own doing of what you do with your next steps and action plan. So
Cool.
people that are listening to this, make sure you do something about it. Otherwise, if you don't, you're left behind.
Yep. Love it. Thank you very much, sir. Look forward to being in the new podcast studio next week.
Yes.
Will it be next week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Perfect. Looking forward to it. Thank you to the viewers. Appreciate you. Make a change. Do something different. That's for sure. And keep investing. Stay invested.
If this message towards the end resonated with you or you think it will someone else, I think pass that message on to someone or pass this podcast. So hopefully it can inspire them to do something.
100%. And don't stay on the fence. That would be my final message. Do not stay on the fence and continue to complain and continue to do the same thing. You will be left behind.
Correct.
Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.